back in Flash, it comes time to add in the audio. So if I want to add the audio to my original one and start it playing, the problem is I can't adequately judge where does the audio sit as we go from one scene to the next. But if I go into my new one, which is the composite, and I am going to modify my view here and choose fit in window. Actually, I don't want to choose fit in window for that. I'm just going to shrink it down much smaller so I can see all of these layers occurring. It's recommended when you put audio into a project that you put audio onto its own layer so it's easier to find. And depending on how you're putting your audio, if you have sound effects and other pieces that are working into it, chunks of dialogue, you can often get away with about 2 or 3, maybe 4 audio layers so that you can stagger the keyframes that are occurring. So if I have one track I want to use just for my main music bed, I can put that in and call this music. And now on this, if I want the audio to start playing on frame 1, I can click here, and if I look in my property panel, sound is a property of a frame. So I clicked on a frame, my property panel now shows me frame properties. If I click on artwork, it shows me the movie clip properties, but I want to choose the frame. Their sound is now an option. If I currently look, there are no sounds, so I have to bring sounds into my project. And it's under File, Import, and import to library or stage does not actually matter in this instance because the sound will always just dump into the library. So typically I just hit Command R, which is import. So Talk Like a Pirate Day, ARG! I think that's coming up sometime soon. But when we have Talk Like a Pirate Day, then we can say Command ARG, and it's just more fun that way. And then at this point I wait for the dialogue to come up, navigate to my audio file. Waves are the preferred method of import into Flash because they're typically an uncompressed file format. They haven't already been beat up into, say, an MP3. And then you can tell Flash how you want the sound to be compressed in the finished published SWF file. So I select my audio file, hit open. AIFF files work as well. Anything else, you're taking your life into your own hands. I use Wave for 99.9% of the work I do. We can see that there's still no sound in my timeline, but if I look over in the library, I will see that sound is now here. So again, sound is a property of the frame, so click on the frame, go to Properties, go to Sound, and now I can choose that sound off the list. And if I look here, I can see it gives me an approximate waveform of the sound as it's occurring, so I can see that happening on screen. That's good. There are 3 syncing methods that you can use. If you want to be able to scrub the timeline to hear what the sound is, then you need to set the sync method away from the default of event and set it to stream. So when you set it to stream, this is what we use for doing dialogue and voice characters and things like that. That allows you to then, so we can scrub and hear. That works a little bit easier. When you set the sound to stream, it will then drop frames of the animation, trying to make sure the animation stays in sync with the audio itself. Remember that Flash is a frame-based tool, audio is a time-based element, so there's always going to be a slight disparity between the two. If you've watched Flash animations where the characters are talking and moving and the animation is out of sync with the audio, they probably have not chosen stream, but instead have worked with the default of event, which the event of starting on this keyframe, entering that keyframe causes the sound to start playing. So if I move my timeline to here and hit return or enter, it starts playing. We don't hear any audio because I never entered frame 1, which is the trigger for telling that audio to play. If you've seen Flash websites where the audio starts looping back and playing on top of itself, that happens often when the animation finishes ahead of the audio, and then it goes back and hits that event keyframe of that audio, causing it to start a second instance and a third and a fourth instance of that sound to start playing, and it causes audio discord and distress. If you don't use event but you start, it won't start a new copy of the sound until the first one is done. But typically for most animation, we're going to use stream for most of your audio, though there are some times when you do short sound effects, gunshots, doors opening or closing. So you have the small little sounds. Those often you can just leave out as event, and then they generally will sync up reasonably well. If when your project all comes together, if your audio seems to be hopelessly out of sync with the animation, though you have the keyframes correct on the timeline, at that point we have to take the extra step of using ActionScript or code programming to tell the audio when to play, and then that gives much more dependable results. So now if I hit enter, we can see the sound is starting to play with it. It's not bad that there's actually a little lull in right before we switch to the next part, so that the audio just kicks in as it's gone black, got quiet. Now we have the next audio kick in as the trees come up. So that works out pretty well. So I'm getting lucky with that portion of the animation. If we move to the next part, it almost seems that I would want the next part to start here instead of over here. So realistically what I can do is I can now take these frames. I first start out with the tween span and just pull that over to about there, and then select these other frames like that, highlight them, shift F5 to make them go away, and then I'm trying to be lazy, not have to highlight all of them, but if I highlight those frames there, then I can just, with them highlighted, I can just drag the chunks over like that. So now it ties in with the audio. So trying to get the animation to sync a little bit better with the audio. So sometimes you get lucky and the pieces come together. If I want to have non-music audio occurring in my project, at this point I would add another layer, and then I could call this character 1. So if I have a character within my piece, and then I would put a keyframe where I want their audio to start playing, select the audio after it's been imported into my project. So import the audio, put in the keyframe, click on that keyframe, go into properties, select that, add the audio to the project, and just work my way through until I have all the audio synced up with all of my visuals. And that is all it takes.